All my life I have fought with depression, and it really came to fruition when I was a young adult at college. And I hadn't been on my own for a long time, and this was really the first time I was away from home. And things just got really out of hand, where I was going out every single night. I wasn't studying. I got into some really bad situations at school, and finally one night that I had really fallen in love with a boy that was there, and he basically dumped me, and I just got to the point where I just didn't feel that living was worth it. And I went to my dorm room and I took a bunch of pills, and I should have known better, because both my father and my mother were in the medical field. So I knew what I was doing, but I just wanted to take the pain away. And it was amazing that all the people that I thought I was hiding from knew what I was doing, and they basically rescued me. But I suffered for months after that. My hearing went, I couldn't see very well. I was pretty miserable, and I realized at that point that who was I letting down? Was it me? Was it my parents? And then I realized that why didn't I complete the act? And I realized that there was a reason that I was supposed to live that day, and all those people that I thought were against me were actually put there for a reason. And it was just an amazing thought. And I still fight with depression every single day of my life, but the biggest point of that whole story is that I'm still alive, and I'm here to share that you can get so down, but there are people there that are put there for reasons you don't know about until it actually happens.
One of the things that I love about the gospel stories and the announcement of the resurrection is that they have a ring of truth about them. One of the examples of what I mean by that is, if you were to pick your ideal witnesses to give testimony to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, you probably wouldn't have picked a woman to be the first eyewitness of the resurrection. You would have picked somebody important, a soldier or a politician or a scholar, somebody that could have put some credibility behind the testimony. But the Gospels tell the story differently, and that's what actually gives it that ring of truth. The first eyewitness of Jesus' resurrection from the dead was Mary Magdalene, a person who knew Jesus intimately and loved him dearly. She was one of the ones that walked with him all the way to the end of the cross, and was part of the process that led to his burial, where she anointed him with spices and herbs and prepared his dead body as it was put into the tomb. She was actually going back to the tomb to do some more of those burial preparations when she arrived and saw an empty tomb. In that moment, she panicked, and she went a little bit ballistic. She asked all the people that she could find, but the only ones that were there were actually angels of the Lord. And the question that comes out of her mouth, and I think this is so wonderful, she's talking to an angel of the Lord, and what's on her mind is, where is Jesus? What have you done with his body? The next person she talks to is actually the risen Jesus Christ himself. But Mary's mindset is still on the old. She is thinking that Jesus is dead and his body has been stolen by someone. And this is where we pick up in our gospel passage for today. Having said this, Mary turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She said in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father and to my God and your God." One of the things that puzzles me about that passage, and it's puzzled actually New Testament scholars and people who study the Bible, is why did Jesus in that moment say to Mary, "Do not cling to me"? Was it something about the resurrected body of Jesus that couldn't be touched? Or was there another reason why he said to her, "Do not cling to me"? The reason that he gives her is that I haven't yet ascended to my Father. So don't hold on to me, go and tell my brothers. But why did he say that? Well, let's think about the one theory that maybe there was something about Jesus' body as the resurrected body that you couldn't touch. Maybe there was something about it that was spiritually dangerous, or perhaps there was something that would have rocked Mary's world in an unhelpful way if she had touched the risen body. Maybe it was a spiritual body and you couldn't touch it. Well, that can't be the answer. Last week we talked about doubting Thomas, and you'll remember that Jesus said, "Touch me." He told Thomas to stick his fingers in his hands and put his hand in his side. You could touch the resurrected body of Jesus. It had a corporal form. It was something that could be touched. Now, I think Jesus is saying to Mary something slightly different than "don't touch me." What he said is, "Don't cling to me." And that's exactly what Mary wanted to do. You remember from the context that what Mary was looking for and what she wanted more than anything else was Jesus' body. She wanted to hold on to his body, and when Jesus says, "It's not here," she asked him, not knowing it was him, but the gardener, "Where have you placed his body? Tell me where it is so I can go and get it and take it to where I am." Now, whether Mary could physically carry the dead body of Jesus is another question, but she thought that she could, and that's what she wanted, was his body. Why? Because Mary, out of all the disciples, loved Jesus intimately and deeply. She loved being with him. She was the one that anointed his feet with her hair. She probably prepared many meals for him and was with him by his side, serving him and ministering to him all along the way of his journey. He had rescued her from demonic oppression and changed her life in a dramatic way. And she wanted to be in the physical presence of Jesus and wanted to be able to share those meals with him and continue to serve him in the way that she had been doing up to that point. But Jesus knew that with the resurrection, all things were changing. Mary was going to have to learn a new way of relating to Jesus. Mary was going to have to learn that she couldn't serve Jesus meals like that anymore. She wasn't going to be able to wash his feet with her hair. She wasn't going to be able to serve his every need on earth here. Jesus was going to ascend and be with the Father, and it wasn't going to be something that Mary could hold on to that old way of life and that old existence. You know, just as Mary couldn't cling to Jesus in that way, so too we can't cling and hold on to the old ways anymore either. With the resurrection of Jesus, everything changes, and it has to change for you and me personally. There's another story I love from the Gospel of John, where there was a man who was an invalid for 38 years. He couldn't walk, he couldn't take care of himself. He was an invalid, he was a paraplegic. And he literally had to be carried everywhere that he went. And what the story tells us is that for 37 years, this man would be placed at a particular time at the Sheep Gates pool in Bethsaida, and he would wait for some superstitious event to take place. And the idea is that there would be an angel that would come and stir the waters of the pool, and if anybody could get into the waters that had been stirred by the angel, just at that right moment they would have been healed. Well, Jesus shows up on the day that that man is there sitting by that pool. And he asks the man one of the most important questions that could ever be asked of anybody. Do you want to be healed? Now that man said, I'm here. There's nobody to take me whenever the water is stirred in the pool. And so Jesus says to the man, "Pick up your mat and walk." And the man picks up his mat and begins to walk. Just think about what changed for that man's life. Up to that point, for 38 years, he had to be carried everywhere that he went. He was totally in bondage to his own disease. And all of his relationships were developed and formed around his illness and his chronic problems. But Jesus, in an instant, made all things new for him. He was a changed man. And from that day forward, he could walk wherever he wanted to walk. He could perhaps hold a job. He could make his own meals. What would happen to all of those relationships that he had formed? How would his relatives relate to him? They didn't have to carry him anymore. They didn't have to prepare his meals for him anymore. He wasn't going to be spending all of his time by the pool at the Sheep's Gate. What was he going to do with all this extra time? What was he going to go and see? All of life for that man in an instant was changed. Everything was new for him. And he was going to have to learn what it meant to be a healed person. Well, that's the same case for us with the resurrected life. When Jesus rose from the dead and called us to new life in him, everything changed in that moment. And everything changed for us personally. That means that we can no longer live in the old patterns of a worldly and secular materialistic way of looking at things. All of life now has to be fathomed and contemplated with the eyes and the mindset of the resurrected life. That means that everything has to change. I remember when I was a brand new Christian, and I became a Christian in the middle of a fraternity house. When I was at a party one night, I went up to my room in the frat house, and through reading the scriptures, the Lord called me to himself and made all things new for me in an instant. Well, I can remember very clearly and distinctly that as I began to change, and I changed, I stopped entering into the parties that my fraternity brothers were interested in. I wasn't interested in those things anymore. I stopped drinking as heavily. And all of a sudden, my brothers started to have to learn to relate to me as a Christian, where they were relating to me as, in a sense, a hedonist. And they didn't know what to make of that. They didn't know what to make of me. One by one, some of them would come up to my room and they go, "Charlie, you're different. Something's changed about you. You're not the same guy that used to party down with us. Now you're up here reading your Bible. What's going on with you? What's going on in your life?" Likewise, members of my own family who had related to me as a non-Christian were now having to relate to me as a sold-out follower of Jesus. And those relationships were being redefined and changed. And I can tell you that there was conflict. It's interesting, when that man who picked up his mat and started walking, he actually went to the temple courts and was carrying his mat on the Sabbath day. And they, in their grumpiness, said, "What are you doing walking around with your mat on the Sabbath?" As if somebody can't be healed on the Sabbath. That's just crazy, but that was the mentality. Why? Because people can't handle resurrected people. If they don't have that experience of resurrected life in themselves, they're going to be opposed to it in your life. And we, as changed people, need to be prepared for external opposition to the changes that they're going to see in our lives. We also need to be prepared for another thing, and that is that there's going to be a stubbornness to us that wants to hold on to the old. One of the challenges that Jesus gives to us as we walk the path of the resurrected life is to personally let go of the old self ourselves and walk in the newness of life. Jesus, the risen Lord Jesus Christ, is the source of life. And as we get connected to him like branches to the vine, Jesus is the vine, we will begin to have life coursing through our veins. And that life will change everything. But just as our relatives and our friends and our coworkers are going to have opposition to the new things that they see in us, so will the old self. And the Lord is wanting to overcome even that challenge in him.